Welcome to Mad Men, a podcast dedicated to recapping and analyzing the AMC series Mad Men from the perspective of three wildly different types of watchers. We've got somebody watching the show for the very first time. We also have someone who is re-watching for the first time since the series ended back in 2015. And then there's me, Jon Negroni, who throws DVDs of Mad Men seasons at my own face. Joining me, as always, is Will Ashton, our first-time viewer. And Will, you and your stupid pact, save the fiction for your podcast.
It's a pretty devastating line. I mean, in an episode filled with, some cutting blows of the verbal persuasion, that one was a kind of low blow in a way.
Well, speaking of which, of course, we have Mike Overhulse, our first-time rewatcher. And Mike, let's pretend this podcast is not responsible for every single good thing that's ever happened to you. And you tell me the episode number or make one up, and I'll podcast about it.
One of your longer intros, but also definitely not your worst.
I had to do it. No, that's a pretty low bar, to be honest. Welcome, guys, to the latest episode of Mad Men. It's so good to see you. We're picking up on The Other Woman. This is season 5, episode 11. It's the 63rd overall episode of Mad Men. This one aired May 27th, 2012 on AMC, of course. This is written by Semi Shellis and Matthew Weiner, directed by Phil Abraham, the longtime cinematographer and go-to director of the show. Now, before we get into the episode proper, I have to ask, because we're kind of recording this after a big period of time. We were dropping episodes that we pre-recorded, and this episode we're recording it. I mean, the plan is to release it next week. We'll see what happens. But yeah, how are you guys feeling, like, jumping back into the show?
I mean, you know me, I was about ready to quit this thing, but then you came, pulled my hand, said that I could get a raise, which was pretty impressive because I'm not getting paid for this. And then you started kissing my hand for some reason.
I doubled it from 0 to 0 and then added.
Yeah, well, I mean, it technically did double it, I mean, so, it didn't really persuade me, but it let me give you another chance to kind of finally finish this thing as best we can.
I think what really persuaded you is all the fans, everybody who's been asking us to finish this thing. It means a lot. Like, we got a lot of comments. We got a lot of people, like, some of them a little mean, but maybe deservedly so. But a lot of, there was somebody who was like, we believe in you guys. It's like, thanks. But what about you, Mike? I know for you, watching Mad Men is it's like taking a nap. You do it in your sleep.
Exactly. I feel like two things have happened in my life. Is one, Hannah, my wife, has fallen in love with Your Friends and Neighbors, one of the shows that Will says doesn't exist because it's on Apple TV.
Great show.
But now she's like in the Hamassance. Is that how a term we can use? The John Hamm Renaissance?
Yeah, he's back. He's culturally relevant again.
We've done 5 seasons of this damn podcast, and finally Hannah's like, you know what? Maybe now I'll watch Mad Men.
So she's watching it now.
I purposely stopped her because I was like, we can't do it because I feel like it kind of ruins the integrity of John Sane and Mike, who's rewatching it for the first time. I can't go back for number 3 yet. And so that has been the strain of my marriage. But the thing I was thinking about, jumping back into this episode, first off, what a wild episode to jump back into. So heavy to just kind of deal with. But it was also one of those things where you're trying to gain your bearings. And I think, this cool moment, guys, of thinking about when this show started and where the characters have come, especially with Peggy and her journey and how important this is for her. And then I started thinking about us and our lives and thinking of where we were when we started the podcast. And it's just crazy to jump back into it and be like, wow, that's years ago now at this point, and we're in very different phases, but it's just so comforting. Mad Men is just so comforting to come back to. You know what I mean? I love this damn show.
I mean, I'm pretty much the same. I don't know what you're talking about, but
wait, what?
I said I'm pretty much the same. I don't know what you guys are talking about.
Yeah, it's just funny. Yeah, over the course of doing this podcast, we kind of lightly tease this off the recording, but both Mike and I have gotten, we both got married, not to each other, but to other people, much to my chagrin.
Unfortunately.
I'm currently dealing with my season 4 Don Draper, where I'm in the middle of a divorce, and it's kind of funny because I'm freshly divorced, and I'm watching season 5 again, which is the comeback, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know about all that. I don't know if I'm going to have that same Don Draper journey, and I think for me it's going to be a little different. But that's the thing. That rewatching this show for me is always, no matter what stage of life, there's always going to be some nugget of truth, wisdom, and maybe something vaguely problematic that I'm going to really enjoy sinking my teeth into.
The one thing I will say, because I don't know when I'll get a chance to say, is you were talking, Mike, about the Hamazons that's happening right now. And it's funny you mentioned that because I just this week watched Gail Daughtry and the Celebrity Sex Pass, which is basically a kind of pseudo Mad Men movie. John Hamm and what's his face? John Slattery play, like versions of themselves, exaggerated versions of themselves. John Slattery in particular, he's actually really funny in
like
the movie.
Pop Tarts thing again?
No, like they're playing. No, like in that thing they were playing in Unfrosted. They were playing the characters again. They were playing Dawn and Roger. In this case, they're actually playing like
we don't know for sure.
Yeah,
I don't think they're officially credited as such, but they're meant to be because that movie was in the 60s or whatever. But no, this is like they are playing versions of themselves in the movie without giving too much away. Like John Slattery is like on the outs with John Hamm, and he's like really hoping to connect with him again. And it's kind of mirroring like this podcast where it's just like, we've been trying to get back together. We've been busy. The John Hamster, like a big part of his thing is that he's too busy for, other people. And he ends up being sort of like a Oz type figure in that film. And, there's some nice parallels. I'm glad I got to watch that movie this week.
Reminds me of another interesting parallel, which is the Odyssey gets invoked a lot in this episode. And the timing of that is just kind of funny because of how Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey is coming out the week we record this. I just saw the movie a few days ago. We're recording this on a Thursday, so a lot of people are going to be watching it for the first time today. Well, I know you're going to be checking it out soon, but it gets brought up like multiple times. Like I think like Pete says, like it's an epic poem to get home, like that kind of thing. But anyway, so the episode itself, let's talk about the setting and all of that. It takes place roughly around May 1966 is the idea, but it's not super, super clear. There's a needle drop at the very end. The Kinks' You Really Got Me from 64, which is Peggy's exit song. In terms of guest stars, we have a few newbies. Well, we have Alison Brie, of course, coming back as Trudy. We have Joel Murray as Freddie Rumsen coming back, which is always fun to see him. Ted Shaw's Kevin Ram, however you say it, comes back. And we have, I don't think we've seen him before, but Herb from Jaguar, Gary Basaraba, he's been brought up before. That's the reason I can't quite remember, because he is the one that was puked on or whatever. And then, of course, Joan's mother, Gail, played by Christine Esteberg. But so let's talk about this episode. The basic gist of it is Sterling Cooper Draper Pryce trying to win the Jaguar account, but in the process, will it lose its soul? Very controversial episode of the show. It's considered one of the richer episodes of Mad Men, been talked about quite a lot. There's been a lot of debate around this series episode, and whether or not it's as good as it's trying to be. Some people have even called it as like the magnum opus of season 5, but I guess we'll see for ourselves. We'll start with you, Will. Since this is your first time watching, we have three main plots here. The big plot is Joan and the indecent proposal that she goes through. It's the spine of the episode. The second plot is Peggy leaving the firm, leaving Don. That's the kind of big emotional gut punch. And then finally, the third story here is Megan's audition, which is kind of like the quiet third woman in this. What'd you make of this episode? What was your instant reaction to it?
Yeah, I mean, it's, as Mike alluded to, it was pretty heavy stuff. Like I've talked about, I think, or we've talked about in the past, that usually when I'm watching these episodes for the first time, I'll send, little jokey messages to the group chat. And I feel like I didn't do that this time, other than mentioning the abhorrent amount of AI ads that appear on HBO Max for some reason. Just because this is a pretty serious episode. It's, kind of the slimiest for the gentlemen and the most disparaging for the women.
Ironic, too, in a show about prestige advertising.
Yeah.
You're seeing these AI ads.
Yeah, no, it's gross, and it only added to the gross factor of watching these men do pretty horrible, horrendous things. And a show that's basically built around them doing pretty horrible and despicable things. But nevertheless, I thought it was a very meaty and good episode. I can see why it got such a strong IMDb rating. When I was looking up which episode we were watching, I saw that this is, I think, one of the higher rated episodes, at least of the season, maybe of the series. And I know the next episode, the 12th one, also has very high ratings. So it seems like we're gonna get some pretty meaty stuff. And I kind of figured, just generally, not to assume, but like usually when episodes are higher rated, that also tends to mean that like there's more pivotal stuff happening. Unless it's like an outstanding episode like The Suitcase, where it's just like an undeniable great episode. Usually I feel like the IMDb rankings tend to suggest that like this is a memorable, notable episode. So I was prepared for some significant stuff. And sure enough, some pretty significant stuff happened, certainly with Peggy and with Joan. So, and I guess to some extent Dawn in a emasculating sort of way. But yeah, it's a heavy one.
Yeah, it's also similar for Lane too. There's a little bit of like nodding and furthering of his plot line, even if it isn't a major aspect of the episode. But all right, Mike, that brings us to you, our first time rewatcher. You already kind of mentioned like coming back into this one a little bit cold, but how did that affect your viewing of it? Was it a bit different than how you remember? And well, I mean, we got to start with what your original reaction to this episode was back in the day, if you recall.
Yeah, I definitely remember the first time. I think the timing twist got me both times. Like it still kind of floored me like how well that works with Don's reaction. And I think the first time I watched it though, it was kind of through the lens of Don and Don's reaction, or just like kind of how all the men are being scumbags and things like this. It was interesting now on this watch thinking about it less through that lens and more through like how Joan and Peggy, who have been kind of twin flames throughout the show, and how they handle the world of corporate men, and how they've both chosen to take very different routes, and how I feel like this is kind of like the peak of it in an episode where Joan, to get more power in the firm, goes and kind of makes this choice for herself, is forced to make this choice to get what she wants, where Peggy is trying to do it through a different fashion by quitting, by going somewhere else. And I thought that juxtaposition that's been building since literally episode 1, when Joan, like, right, the first couple scenes of the show is Joan giving Peggy the 101 on how to deal with this corporate world. And now we're seeing the fruition of they're both kind of at the peaks of these journeys. I just thought that was so interesting. And I think what I was able to focus in on, there's other things I maybe was able to try to remember. Like, I think it was really important to try to remember the ratcheting up of Lane's financial woes and the stress that's involved there. I feel like that was kind of lost not having watched some previous episodes in a while. But yeah, still a very solid episode. Really hard one to come back to, but still just a really, really solid effort, and one that's still sitting with me.
I guess in regards to your comment about Peggy, I guess you could say she just comes and goes as she pleases. She's the real Jaguar at the heart of the story. Yeah,
she still has
the
magic exercise belt. Is that what you're saying, John?
Yes. Bringing it all the way back to season 1. Yeah, no, I find this to be a really rich episode. There's a lot going on here. For me, I really appreciate how the episode braids the 3 women's stories around a single idea, which is what is a person worth and who gets to set the price. And you kind of gestured that already, Mike, this idea of like each of these women has a price. Like sometimes you watch in TV shows and they kind of like avoid saying what somebody's salary is, for example, or they kind of avoid like those like nitty gritty details for various reasons. A lot of the time because they want somebody to be timeless or they want it to be left to the imagination or whatever. Every once in a while, you have a TV show, maybe do away with this. The Office, I remember, like, still sticks with me. The way that we have a little bit of that with, like, Oscar and Pam and that season where she becomes, like, office manager. And we find out that, like, basically, like, $50,000 a year would be, like, ridiculous for Pam for that kind of job. And then she, like, negotiates down or whatever. So for me, it was kind of interesting that, like, this episode is nothing like that. It's, like, very, very specific to each character. I wanted to bring up the critical consensus, too. I looked up some of the reviews from back when this aired. First and foremost for me was Emily St. James's review, then writing for AV Club, of course. And she gave it an A. She said this was a knockout episode in an already remarkable 5th season. And also kind of, like I just said, like framing the episode around those ideas of like money, integrity, that the real tragedy is that there will never be enough money. Kind of like Don was saying, how it makes Joan's decision, like at one point understandable, but also still devastating that by the time Don comes to her, it's too late. And who's to say if she would have gone through with it either way? I like to believe that she still would have done it, to be totally honest with you. But yeah, it kind of depends, right? Because if you listen to the commentary, which I did, Weiner has like a pretty specific take on this that matches that almost entirely. This idea of like what things are worth and everything like that. Commentary I listened to was him and Semi Shellis, the writer. So very cool stuff there, I guess. Now, Will, yeah.
The one thing I was going to say, just the one thing I couldn't remember was how much Ted have we gotten before this? Like I think
He's
Yeah,
been throughout the season. He's been a foil. This is actually an interesting episode for him because, like, I was going to save it for the Peggy aspect, but like he's more sympathetic in this episode than we've seen him before. So the examples of when we've seen him, the big one was like the Honda pitch where they like pulled one over on CGC. There was a whole moment where Ted is like obsessed with like what Don thinks about him because he brings up to the one writer who was from like seasons 1 and 2 and stuff, who is like, oh, Don's such a genius. And he's like, you talk about me that way or whatever. So we've seen him like make fun of Sterling Cooper. Like they called him up as JFK about the smoking ad or doing the impersonation. And Ted Shaw's like, thanks for mentioning me and giving me free advertising. So that's kind of been what we've seen of Ted. So I was going to turn it to you, Will Ashton. I had a question for you.
And Ted is the Peggy's new boss, correct? Is that who we're referring
Correct.
to? Okay, just making sure I understood. Yeah, I mean, the thing that really, especially as you were talking, kind of sticks with me, and I know it's kind of a tough subject to broach, so I think I'll just kind of rip the Band-Aid off of it, is like knowing how pretty sensitive this episode is, considering that Matthew Weiner wrote it, considering that he has had, pretty direct allegations of sexual harassment and stuff. I mean, I know a term like sexual harassment wouldn't have been thrown around at this time in the 1960s, but yeah, it just kind of feels, it's always just that fascinating sort of thing of just knowing that Weiner is a very thoughtful, mindful, and in many respects kind of open-minded person, but he's not the easiest person to work with. Yeah, and maybe that's what makes him a genius. Maybe that's
he's complicated.
He's complicated, and that's kind of what he recognizes in characters and can bring to them. But yeah, it's always that fascinating and kind of disheartening duality that's just kind of apparent in the show's post-mortem legacy, I guess.
Yeah, you especially notice it in the commentary because that duality. Because in the commentary, so we have the whole thing where we have like the Herb Rennett scene. We find out that like he's one of the 3 votes on the selection committee that determines whether or not Sterling Cooper Draper Pryce gets the account. And he tells Pete and Ken basically over dinner, like strongly implies, says anything but, everything but, that he'll swing his vote if he gets a night with Joan. And then the way Pete kind of brings us to Joan and frames it as like business at a very high level, all this stuff. First of all, a lot of great Pete stuff in this of like really showing like he's the monster that Don created, which is brought up in the commentary of like, he has all this power because Don has been asleep at the wheel. He's let this happen. His like love moon that Bert was telling him early in the season, this is one of the consequences, right? But anyway, so Weiner brings up that like, he's like, Pete's got to do it. What else is he going to, like, he's kind of defending it. He's kind of like, he's saying like, this is business. This is how he makes one comment at one point and he's like, oh, we didn't want to besmirch the car industry folks. Like, but that whole line about like, oh, you wanted to get business. This is how these people are. Weiner was like, yeah, that's like what we've heard. So you kind of get a little bit of that where he's just like, oh, this is a terrible thing for Pete to do, but he's got to do it. It makes total sense. And you're like, well, Matthew Weiner, but maybe that's bad. Like maybe he shouldn't do that. Actually, I don't know. It's kind of a terrible thing to do, actually.
I think it's interesting because Pete has always been like the most like social justice minded employee there, right? Like he was like at the helm when they started hiring like Black people. But then also he has always been Pete, which is very self-motivated and career hungry. And so it is interesting. Like, I do think it had to be Pete to push. I don't know. That's just the dichotomy of Pete Campbell, right? Like, that's why he's such an interesting character.
No, yeah. And like we have like that whole moment. They said it cost them a lot of money to shoot that extra scene where he's at home with Trudy reading to their kid and stuff. And it's like an interesting parallel to like, it's brought up that like Joan has a husband in Vietnam and a baby and all this stuff. And then while everybody's kind of like, what are we going to do? Pete is just kind of like calmly reading the story, like totally blasé, totally like it's just not registering with him, like this awful thing that he has put on the table. And, Pete's an interesting guy. He can't be pegged. Although, he was in season 1.
Yeah, I mean...
if you know what I mean.
And I think the Mad Men Carousel illustrates this pretty well. As the show goes along, it does obviously follow like Pete's perspective on this for a good bit. And then you see inside the meeting where they try to like rationalize this, but I appreciate that from the very beginning, like when they have that dinner with the Jaguar guy, you've got, Ken, who's like good guy Greg, and then you got Pete, who's scumbag Steve, if I remember the meme correctly, who like Ken is just up front and being like, he's not saying anything, he's not trying to further this conversation, he's trying to, be as gentlemanly as possible while like trying to brush this off, and he even tells Pete like, you could have just said she was married. And Pete comes up with like an excuse of like, oh, he wouldn't have done or anything. But I think as Solar Sights points out, like he probably more likely than not would have been pushed off if he had known Joan was married, because there had been, I mean, he wouldn't have known that, that they were on the outs, or that, Joan, has been living with her mom or whatever. He would just think like...
Interestingly enough, though, Weiner kind of takes Pete's position on this and says that like that was intentional to be like, Pete's right. Of course, that doesn't, you can interpret the episode your own way, obviously, but
I mean,
interesting to point out.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like he may have been bullish to an extent, but it's more likely than not that if they hadn't left the door all the way open and just like only left it like a crack open, just been up front and been like, hey, look, like Joan's married, like I don't know what's going on there, but her husband is like in Vietnam and all this stuff. It's more likely than not that he would have been less emboldened to want to do this, I guess. But it's, one of those things where maybe we don't know for sure.
We'll never know. Pete proposes a 10% finder's fee on first year commissions, $50,000. That's roughly 4 times Joan's salary, which is like $12,000 to $13,000. So another thing here is like, you can kind of see like Joan is being paid more than Peggy, because Peggy is making $9,000 based on the math of this episode a year, right? And it's kind of interesting how it kind of like further solidifies this like disparity between the two of them. Well, first of all, like Don even like preempts is like, she's been here 13 years. She's really, really important to the company. Her making partner, he's like coming up with all these excuses because he probably sees that as like, yeah, Peggy, you're kind of getting screwed over here because like the amount of like how much the firm relies on Peggy is really unbalanced based on the amount of money everybody else is making. And I find it kind of interesting that, even Don, that whole thing where he throws the money at Peggy, truly like, you already kind of mentioned it before, Will. It's like, whoa. I mean, what did he expect that she, at the end of the episode, his kind of like disbelief that he finally pushed her over the edge. But were you surprised, Will, that Peggy left? Or were you feeling like, this was inevitable for the series?
I don't know about the series, but this season, it has been so central that there's this like push and pull relationship with Peggy, and that there's been, this episode is very much in the conversation with the suitcase, which was earlier this season, and how like there is always going to be this sort of weird like sister brother, paternal, maternal, like colleague, friend, nothing really romantic, but like these sort of like interweaving type of relationships going on here. And I think it is interesting and telling, and I wanted to gauge the room. I was going to probably wait until later in the episode, but since it's coming up now, I was curious, how much of Dick Whitman do you think comes out in that speech? Because there's certain moments where
Back
I feel
and
like,
forth.
Yeah, I think when
It's a carousel.
Yeah, I think when he mentions the raise, like that's pure Dick. Because there's like a like kind of bright-eyed, like almost like scared look to him. Like he's like, oh, you got me. This is a perfect time for a raise. And it just doesn't seem like Don at all. And it's just like interesting to me that
he switches to Don when he's just like, you owe me everything, and he's being all like cynical and mean.
Yeah.
But then like by the end of it, and then also the like, you don't have to wait till the third, but then at the very end, the Dick comes out.
Well, when women leave,
poor choice of words
like,
for this episode, I have to say. Sorry, Mike, what were you saying?
I was gonna say, yeah, when women leave, right, that's Dick, right? That's his biggest fear. That's like been his trauma, is what's been tough for him. But
do you think that has something to do with his mom?
Well, that's what...
Isn't it always?
Sorry, I was just being stupid.
No, but I mean, do you
think his trauma comes from like his childhood, though?
Yeah. But it is worth pointing out, and I think Matt Zolersice points it out pretty well, that a lot of Don's resentment about this proposition comes from his mom being a sex worker, or having had this sort of difficult relationship. Because, and something I didn't even think about until Zolersice pointed out, is that a very similar thing happened back in, I want to say like season 2 or 3 with Sal, R.I.P., where he was propositioned, and Don had no issue with like being like, do it. Like, don't you want to like get ahead or whatever? Don't you want the account?
No, I think that was more of discussed. Like, he didn't see it as Sal doing it unwillingly. He viewed Sal as being a willing participant in this for fun, not something he was doing for favors or money. But like, he was having like a dalliance with Lee Gardner Jr. and it offended Don, it disgusted Don, and he felt like Sal was like risking the business.
I think a little yes, a little no. I think he was, because Sal made his point pretty clear that he was not interested.
I just don't think
in the
Don
guy.
believed him, because Don does this things like you people, you know,
Sure.
and he kind of makes the comment of like he definitely questions and is very skeptical of like if Sal invited this and wanted this,
Sure, I think that's true.
blaming the victim.
Well, sure.
He's a
It was
bad
the
guy,
50s,
Will.
John. It was the 50s. You know, he wasn't as open-minded as he is now in the
60s.
60s.
It was the 60s, Mike Overhulse.
Did it change by then? Damn.
Nevertheless, I mean, it is worth noting that like he was more cold and less open-minded in that regard. But also that was a younger, relatively Don at that time, and maybe, you know, being divorced.
2 seasons ago. Calm down.
But now he's gotten a divorce. He's kind of in a frizzled relationship. You know, he had to go through to another company. You know, things haven't been, you know, as stable for Don. Since
you sound
that
like
thing
Freddie
happened.
Rumsen, where he's like, Don's a big boy. And in the
Sure.
commentary, Matthew Weiner's like, no, he's not.
Mm-hmm. It was nice to see Freddie again. I know he was around at some point, I think, earlier this season, but
Yes. He's a freelancer, and
yeah. It's just nice to see him whenever he shows up.
Dale was back.
Dale was back. I was going to say, whenever he's... Never mind. We can keep going.
No, go ahead, Mike. You opened the box. Let's find out what's in it.
Nothing.
I was going to bring up, I think it's interesting how, because you mentioned like the whole thing around like Don being disgusted or like it triggering, you know, the disdain he has for like his mother and her being a sex worker. And you can kind of see like some of the stuff we've seen about it, like his Uncle Mac was like a pimp. And I think a lot of that like acting he does with Pete, I think he views Pete as a pimp. I think it's interesting. He brings up like, do you consider Cleopatra a prostitute? It's like a ridiculous framing of that. I was curious, Mike, what you think of like having the whole series in your head without, of course, giving things away. Why do you think Roger ultimately kind of goes along with this, right? Because Roger's somebody who may have loved Joan, had a baby with her, and he kind of just seems, he's just like, all right, you can do it, but like, I'm not paying for it. And it's like, interesting, you know, there's not kind of like this possessiveness that Roger has of her at this point.
Well, I don't think Roger ever really did have that much possession over Joan, right? Like that's always
like, I already
been
drove
the
that
MO.
car.
Exactly. And I think going back to the mother thing, I think that goes back to his relationship with his mother, where like they're very close, but also like he can't stand the woman, so he's okay like not being around, but he can't imagine her like being around. So I think for Roger, just having access to Joan is enough for him, but it's never been an ownership thing because he's rich. He already has it all. He marries, these young 20-year-olds anyways. Like, it was never like an ego thing for Roger. So he doesn't need that ownership over Joan, which is actually then the opposite of then every man that Joan has picked so far, or how she leads her life. I feel like it's dudes who see Joan and just want to be, it's like driving a Jaguar. You want to drive Joan, essentially. But yeah, I just don't think Roger. I think Roger at the end of the day is still Roger and is still self-motivated as well and cares about his career and his like reputation as a partner of this firm, and so then the firm first.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I feel like more than anything, for as much lip service as they try to do to justify their actions or try to act like Joan has autonomy in this situation before she does eventually gain some autonomy, is that especially for Lane and Roger, there's like financial burdens that they're holding. You know, Roger has now 2 divorces that he has to think about, and Lane especially, there's this whole, financial situation that's going to be building. And I think that's what's so interesting about when he, proposes the partner thing to Joan. It's less he's looking out for her, even though he says that, and more just he doesn't want to be caught with the money that he stole, because if they do the whatever buyout that they do to the bank, then he'll instantly be caught. So he thinks this will give him some time. It kind of reminds me of how Harry Crane kind of like accidentally kind of got promoted because he just tried to weasel into like the TV thing, and then that ended up being a very
it was good for the firm, and it was in his self-interest, right? He's protecting his theft, and he's steering her toward something that like she probably wouldn't have thought of on her own. That makes a lot of sense. That like, yeah, she could bargain that. Like she's very likely to secure a partnership in this situation because it's not like she doesn't deserve it too, in terms of who she is as a worker.
Yeah. I mean, I just think it's interesting how often the show, and one of the ways that it's true to life is like how sort of happenstance and like people's self-interest kind of accidentally or unintentionally lead to people doing good for other people or doing something kind of selfless, and then trying to take credit for it, whether rightly or wrongly.
Do you want to bring up some of the Peggy stuff? And probably one of my favorite scenes from this episode that I don't think often gets talked about a lot, but I really appreciate is, Peggy giving that just like impromptu pitch. It's one of our favorite things to see with Peggy is like when she can come up with stuff on the spot. She's done it before, right? Been very spontaneous and like comes up with things. We've seen it ever since season 1, obviously, and continuously we've seen it like at least every season. She has like that moment where she's just like, oh, she comes up with something really smart that saves the day.
And I think it's fascinating that that's like the most Dawn moment is when she comes up with that. Considering that Don, for most of the episodes, like, doesn't have any ideas, like, he's dependent on other people. There's, like, that rare sort of, like, elation that he has when, is it Ginsburg that comes up with the Jaguar pitch?
Yeah.
And also that he sort of has to make concessions with, like, he was very adamant about, like, not being about, like, a mistress or whatever, and then in the end, it is just very alluded to be about a mistress or whatever. So even when he has the quote unquote traditional Don moment, it's a concession and it's like not really him at his best, even though it's considered a big win. So I just think it's fascinating that, especially when she's leaving the firm and kind of leaving the guys out to dry, that she's the one that ends up having the most Dawn, traditionally considered Dawn-esque moment in the episode.
I think that's like one of the reasons is because it comes out of desperation. The first episode is where we see Dawn doing the same thing with Lucky Strike. Out of desperation, he comes up with the "it's toasted" idea. With Peggy, she is constantly in these desperate situations because of Dawn. I think that's why she stayed as long as she has, is because she knows that she's challenged in this environment in a way that she probably wouldn't be at like one of the bigger firms. And ultimately, I think that's one of the only reasons she's even tempted to go to CGC and work for Ted Shaw, because they're a similarly sized firm like Sterling Cooper. It's not like she would be going to McCann where she would just be a cog in the machine. She would actually have like, more of a leadership role. Like she has to be copy chief, not just a copywriter at CGC. So that's a very important detail. So when she does this pitch for Chevalier Blanc, the Cologne account or whatever, it's when she's been boxed out of Jaguar. She has to do she's in charge of everything, quote unquote, all the men who work the pitch. One of the first things in the episode that happens is like the lobster dinner like passes her by, and it's like for comedic effect. And sure enough, though, like the best pitch in the episode, you could argue is hers, because it is hers. Like Dawn's, it's a good pitch, and I want to know like what you thought of the pitch, especially Mike, as a pitch man yourself. The business bitch is what you're called sometimes, but I think Peggy's is more impressive because again, she comes up with it on the spot and it's really good. It has Lady Godiva and A Hard Day's Night and Paris. And, speaking of like doing something that serves your self-interest and is good for the firm, it's like for her, she gets to go to Paris and it's a good ad.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, Peggy's the only one doing some damn work around this entire firm. You know what I mean? Like, but it's still so good because, like, still to this point, though, when Peggy does have these moments where she's coming up with on the spot, like, it's still kind of 50-50 of, like, Peggy, such a damn mouth, or, like, wow, really, really good. And that's
like
just,
with Hines, yeah.
Exactly. And it's just like, and it's growing. Or, like, how she gets frustrated that they're not responding to her genius. You know what I mean? But the thing that makes this Peggy pitch so good is that it's one of those where it's like when you connect on a home run, you just feel it, you know it. And you could tell as Peggy was giving it, she knew it was good. It lands. She's not worried about it. Where I think Don
when Ken does a little clap, I was doing that too.
We're done. He's just another day in the office. You know what I mean? Like here's like, he's Don Draper, right? So his 80% is everybody else is like 130. But it's one of those moments where Peggy and her stroke of genius, comes better than Don and just has that kind of gift that Don also possesses, but just too much else going on in his life. That guy is so busy.
It's so weird that he would like, that he's like, oh, it's Ginsburg's account, all this stuff. And it's like, you get it because he's in a bad mood. The commentary brings that up too. He's in a bad mood because of this Joan stuff. But like, it's so unreasonable, right? Like considering what she's going through, but the fact that he just can't even give her a second thought. And he says it later himself that he's taken her for granted. And yeah, it's like, why would she continue to put up with that? It's abuse. And, the way that she's being treated makes no sense from her perspective. Like, as Freddie Rumsen kind of puts with her, like, he says that she's more than some secretary from Brooklyn who's dying to help out. Like, hearing that from Freddie is what makes it. Because like, even when Don says, like, let's not pretend, like, not every good thing is like, I'm sorry. Like, the person who discovered her was Freddie, Yeah, Don Draper. Speaking of stealing other people's ideas and making them sound like yours, like you're doing with Ginsburg. No. Who said it was like watching a dog play the piano? Wasn't you, Don? Wasn't you? It was our boy Freddie. Yeah, I think he damn near pissed himself when he did it too. I'm trying to combine multiple episodes.
Don play a song with his zipper, okay?
There you go. It's like Mozart. Although we did see something happen with Don's zipper when Megan was in his office. There you go. We can talk about the Megan stuff a little bit. It's not a big part of the episode, but it just kind of like further bolsters the scenes, the whole concept of like not being able to control the fiery woman and all this stuff. And, they have their fight over like what it means for her play and all this stuff, the 3 months of rehearsals in Boston. I have a small little tiny hot take, and you guys can tell me to go to hell. I kind of get like, okay, Don shouldn't have reacted the way he reacted, but I do think it's a little bit like not great that she wasn't more upfront and communicative about like the fact that she'd be gone for 3 months, right? Like it isn't kind of important detail. Like I can't imagine, like, I mean, to be fair, I'm not married anymore.
Yeah.
But, like,
I was going to say, I don't know if...
yeah, Will's like, I don't know, we didn't need to take marriage advice from this guy. I was like, no, I've seen it play out.
Yeah.
But Mike, as somebody in a successful marriage...
No one's taking marriage advice from me either, because I've never been married, and who knows if I'll ever be married.
I just think, like, who tells their spouse, like, oh yeah, like, I'm gonna be gone for 3 months without, like, really properly setting you... Again, he shouldn't have acted the way he acted and been a douchebag about it. But at the same time, I think the point of the scene isn't that, obviously. The point of the scene is that Don's only thinking about what her ambition is costing him, right? And his like, I don't want you to fail, the kind of stuff like that. I think that is just it's showing that he does, like the same way with Peggy. He doesn't really care about her. He cares about what she brings to his life, and that's one of his fundamental flaws.
I think if Don doesn't want Megan to act childish, he probably shouldn't have married a child. You know what I mean? Like Megan is young and still chasing her dreams, and so like they make, you know what I mean? Also, here's the thing.
You can say like she's probably scared to bring it up. Yeah, that's a good point.
Why tell dad about you crashing your van into the mailbox, right? If he doesn't notice, he doesn't notice. And honestly, is Don gonna care that she's gone for 3 months? No, he's not.
Yeah.
Like Don's gonna go do Don things and be fine.
I think he'll care because it affects him. I don't think it's because he cares about her, but I think he cares about like what she brings to his life.
Because he's not going to be eating spaghetti 3 times a week.
Right. What is he gonna do? Throw spaghetti on the floor himself?
He's gonna hang out with his kids? Give me a break.
Yeah. I mean, I think the big reason Megan didn't mention it is I don't know if she knew that she would get this far in the audition process, but also just that I think she knew that was how Don was going to react to some extent, and she was just kind of waiting until she had to tell him in some way or another.
Tries to do it kind of quick, like caught up in the celebration, maybe hoping that he would use the celebration as a cover, right, and not lash out. Yeah. I mean, she is like in that way, like not manipulative as a pejorative, but I think that she's like trying to like control the situation as much as she can because she knows how he is.
I mean, she just is inherently more self-aware than Betty ever was, and that's something I feel like that Don is both attracted to and scared to. Of maybe attracted to because he's afraid of. I don't know. I'm not Freud, but yeah, there's a lot going on there.
And he was pretty rude to her earlier in the episode too, and like he gets so defensive with her when she's trying to help him. Like he goes to her about the Jaguar thing and the mistress thing, and like she's giving him like really decent feedback, and he's kind of being a pill instead of like hearing her out. And sure enough, she just relents and is like, okay, sure, whatever, not my problem, like she says later.
Yeah, I was really hoping that her throwaway line was going to be the pitch, like her saying it's not my problem was when the guys were like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
That's it. Other cars, they're lemons. This one moves.
Jaguar.
This one, purrs like a kitty. It's not your problem. Whatever. Well, this episode.
Great pitch.
We gotta get this guy onto fucking Madison Avenue.
Yeah. One little detail too that I love about that is that, first of all, like Don, instead of working, is literally like getting sexually serviced by his wife. But then also, even every pitch in this whole episode originates from a woman. It doesn't originate from the men. So like we've already talked about that pitch, but the Jaguar pitch is because of Megan's actor friend. It's because of her like impromptu audition for the Jaguar team, where she's like crawling on the conference table showing her panties, and that is what sparks Ginsburg's breakthrough. So really, she's the one who should be getting that finder's fee.
I keep laughing in my head because I just think it'd be just like a very serious bit of Will working at an advertising agency, but the only thing he ever pitches is it purrs like a kitty.
And his breakthrough is when he finally lands the Garfield account.
Right. That'd be great. But then that would mean my biggest competition, of course, is
Garmfell.
Well, no.
Dog the bounty hunter.
Well, what's his face? Our boy, the dog.
Chauncey.
Chauncey.
Wow, it's been so long you couldn't get Chauncey. That's like the
Yikes.
mascot of this podcast.
And then, the episode would be cats versus dogs because I'd be the cat and then Chauncey is my competitor. And, it's like that's where this goes. He's constantly pitching dog pitches. I'm constantly pitching cat pitches.
I have another spicy hot take. Okay,
No.
you guys are probably going to tell me to go to hell. So the tagline they come up with, Jaguar, at last something beautiful you can truly own. It's a little wordy. Doesn't flow. I don't think it's a very good tagline. I think it needs some alts, right? It's too much. Something beautiful you can truly own. It's just too many syllables. There's something about it. I'm not a fan.
Was it a real tagline?
No. I'll double check, but no, it's not based on anything real.
Have we
Is
talked
it?
about this yet? That my in-laws both own Jaguars? Like, they are obsessed with being Jaguar owners, which adds just a very weird, fun layer watching all this about, like, the Jaguar pitches and stuff.
I did not know that.
Maybe I should ask them. Maybe I should ask them what they think about this pitch and John's reaction. They could tell me.
I'm sure they have some thoughts.
It was
Do
fictional.
they feel like it's something
but-
beautiful they can own?
It was fictional, but funny enough, on Reddit, somebody posted a fake ad 5 years ago. So they didn't use AI to do it, but they made a fake ad that looks like it was clipped out of a newspaper. And it almost fooled me for a second. I was like, what? It was an ad. But yeah, they were like, no, I just made this up. Anyway, let's see. What else do we have here? But yeah, we haven't really talked about the structural trick that happens in this episode. Mike, I think you brought it up. Curious what you thought of it, Will. Like, did you see that coming where the episode intercuts Don's pitch with Joan and Herb in the hotel room? It hides the chronology of the episode. And the director's commentary, I should point out, this was something that Shellis actually pitched to Weiner. She was like, you know what? I think this is going to solve this problem that they were having with the episode. The structure wasn't quite working for them because they were trying to get the timing of things right. And one thing that Weiner was struggling with was he wanted us to watch the pitch and not think that it had happened. Like that they didn't want him to think that she had gone through with it, but then they also didn't want the audience to know. So this was the way that they solved that problem, which was, again, a woman coming up with a solution. This because it was Shellis's idea. But yeah, how did it work on you? Well, were you confused at all? Because I know sometimes people have been confused by this moment and have had to rewatch it and be like, wait, what? How did that work?
It didn't confuse me because they made a big point about the robe and they were like, I'm about to get in the shower. So as soon as she put on the robe, initially, when her mom first came in the room, I was like, did Dawn come over twice? But then when she put on the robe, I was like, oh, they did time.
They did a little
change,
switcheroo.
Which, they've done, I forget what the episode was, but the one where we get like a jump forward and Dawn's like bleeding in the hotel room or something.
Yeah, 3 Sundays, I think.
Yeah. They've done things like that where, we kind
They
of
do a
get
little bit of a
information.
Christopher Nolan kind of thing where they play around. Again, it's uncanny with the release of this Odyssey movie. What the heck?
I felt that one was a little forced, but I'll give it
Aw.
to you. Yeah.
I got all happy.
Hmm.
But yes, no, the point is that Joan's night already happened a day before. And I love the moment when the way that Dawn finds out is when they say, we need the partners in the room. Ken gets whisked out. Joan walks in and Don gives her that look. And it's like, oh, because you don't know too if what he's thinking. Like, is he thinking that he told her too late? Is it that she didn't listen? That she decided she went through with it anyway? And I doubt he's going to ask.
It's like an opposite Goodfellas moment. You know what I mean? It's they walk into the room and you can just see the moment in their faces. Everyone understands what happens.
Yeah. It's like, oh, is there anything else here? We covered a lot of stuff.
Well, there's 2 things I wanted to discuss before I forget. One is I'm very disappointed in Bert. Bert had no reason to throw Joan under the bus, even though he has little let her
He's
know.
not a sentimental guy, though.
I know, but
I think it fits his character.
But still, he tries to be, kind of an upstanding guy where it's like, you tell her that she can say no or whatever, but he still votes in favor
Business
of her.
is business.
I know, but it just bums me out. But
sorry, I shouldn't say Bert's not sentimental after what he said about the secretary last season. She was an astronaut.
She was an astronaut. He's only sentimental
Blankenship.
about people that are in the twilight of their lives, I guess.
Well, you would think that he would see Joan as, I know she's on the twilight, but similar kind of story. Was born in, an apartment without a fridge, no handyman to repair it, and now she's a partner. She's an astronaut.
Well, Bert doesn't know that. He's too busy reading Atlas Shrugged or whatever he does.
I know. I'm goofing off. But I forgot that I put this down. This is what Weiner's stated reason was for the restructuring. He said, well, the first, so the audience watched Joan go through with it before the pitch. He said, no one is going to listen to a word Don says. They're not going to believe he could have won. So they reordered time, preserved the pitch's power, and then they pulled the rug out. And yeah, there you go. And the whole thing where like Roger says the pitch was one of his good ones. Oh, that moment also kind of hits me.
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
like, was it?
I don't know. I mean, maybe this is my hot take, but I feel like Don's kind of going through the motions with that pitch. Like it's not really his idea. It doesn't seem like he's doing anything we haven't seen him do before. He doesn't even really feel like at ease. Like he feels kind of mechanical by Don standards. I don't know. It doesn't like it's like effective. Like he does a nice job, but it doesn't feel like Don prime. It just kind of feels like, yeah, Don's doing his thing.
I said that earlier, right? Like Don gives 80%, and for him, that's better than most people can put out. But like, when is what's the last pitch that Don did actually care about and track?
Yeah,
Carousel, I guess.
Been a while. Probably the Honda one, which wasn't really a pitch, but it was like a preserving of dignity. But yeah.
Well, the other thing I was going to say was the Little Deaths, the play that
Little Murders.
Little Murders. Yeah, I
also said they brought it up at the commentary. It's like it's relating from that earlier episode, Mystery Date. Like it was this period of time, like the murders and stuff, like the serial killing stuff that's happening in the city, the violence in New York City and all that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm only familiar with it because I know there's a movie Alan Arkin directed that I think is based on this play. I don't know if he's in it, but I think he directed it. I that's the only connection I know to it. But what I was going to mention was the audition, which is harrowing to watch in its own right. Especially because we don't really, I feel like unlike some of the other things, we don't really know the full extent. Like it's possible what we see in the audition, it was like the extent of it, which is degrading in its own right, but it also cuts in a way where it's like they might have like asked her to like do more twirls or something. I don't know. Like I don't know. Like we don't know how degrading it was for her. And in some respects, that makes it even sadder to watch.
Well, this reinforces the idea of the transactional American dream, which is what I think this episode we've kind of been alluding to. Like everything in this episode has a price. Jones is $50,000 versus the 5%. Peggy is the 18,000 to the 19,000. Jaguar is the woman you own. And I think that the episode strips like Mad Men's core theme that we've talked about a lot, which is like the gap between our lives and our aspirational fantasies, and it strips it to its ugliest essence. This idea that sometimes we want something so badly that no price seems too high. And in this episode, we see how three different women, they are praised for what value that they bring, and they kind of answer these things differently. And I think that's why people get so much out of this episode, is because it sums up the show in such a key way. Or does it? There is something I want to get your take on, actually, both of you, which is whether or not Joan's choice is entirely hers. Do you think that she's being coerced by Pete, Lane, or even like the spite with Roger, right? Or do you think like, no, she's doing it for herself. She's doing it for her son on terms that she sets with Lane's help, right? I'm curious, like you could make the argument it's empowerment in a way. My worry is that it lets the men off the hook, right? And I think that's an interesting debate to have, like from lots of different people who watch the show and rewatch the show.
I mean, I find it to be a sad thing to watch. So I'm generally of the mind that it's just kind of a, sad thing to experience. And knowing that Joan has to make that choice at all is sad in its own right. But I think it's a little bit of both to answer your question. I think Joan finds autonomy and I think she finds empowerment in the decision because she gets to do it on her terms. But the fact that she has to do it at all, the fact that she's in a position where she has to worry about if she'll lose her job or if she gets the blame thrown on her for losing the account, even though the other guys have been like, oh, especially Don have been like, oh, it's just an account, whatever. Pete and the other guys make it pretty explicit that she'll be blamed for it, whether directly or otherwise, and that she'll have to carry the weight of if the agency falls short or if it collapses even. So I think it's a little bit A, a little bit column B, it's not something that I think she made it naturally, but I think she finds a way to do it that's not as horribly degrading as it very easily could have been.
It's a real Joni's choice, you could say.
Sure.
There it is. But do you agree, Mike? Or are you more team, girls get it done?
I think that it, like, I make a joke about Sophie's choice, but I do think it's like a really terrible decision that she's forced into by really bad people. But then she does make the decision, but it's a decision that she's being forced to make to get something that she already kind of deserved. And it's benefiting everyone else, even probably more than it does her at the end of the day. And she's the one sacrificing the most. So, yes, she makes the decision for herself, but she shouldn't never have been in the position to have to make that decision.
Yeah, and I think there's like a cool mirror too between how there's a mirror between Peggy and Joan here. We kind of touched on it already, but like the idea that Peggy is kind of, on the one hand, she's sort of bought and sold too, at like dinner and $19,000 to this guy, right? But on the other hand, like she's entering a new profession while Joan is ascending by accepting the oldest one, right? So like while Peggy defies the conventions of like how to succeed, Joan, which echoes, of course, her philosophy since season 1, is trying to master the finer details, the wringing of advantage from her being powerless, which I think is kind of interesting that you would look at both and say which one, obviously we know which one is more ideal, but at the same time, it's like, can you really blame Joan for dealing or for navigating this world that was handed to her the way it was? That, yeah, she's been kind of like forced on this path for multiple reasons. One of them being like the way her body is, constantly objectified. And like, I like how they point out in the commentary that she's the one, like she decides that she is going to undo her dress herself, right? And it's like, if there's going to be something she has agency over, it's that at the very least. A really good little detail there. I didn't have any trivia for this one, nothing too crazy that I haven't already brought up already. In terms of the Emmys, Christina Hendricks was an Emmy nominee for this season, and because this episode has been routinely cited as one of her best, if not her best showcases in the entire show, maybe her career, probably her career, and especially with like how she holds herself through this episode. But yeah, it didn't have too much. I did notice, we talked about how the pact between Ken and Peggy was like a callback from earlier episodes that, if they leave together, or if one of them leaves, they leave together, which Peggy violates that pact. She leaves without Ken. And in fact, like the last thing she really has with Ken is she kind of throws the pact in his face. And it made me sad. I know we already kind of brought it up, but I was like, poor Ken. I mean, what did he do to you, bro? Like kind of, that's why Ken, he becomes such a sympathetic character. I know it's so surprising for you considering his growth from season 1.
I mean, I guess you could argue that, well, actually, never mind that. I was going to say that he was around for the Jaguar thing, that she resents it maybe. But in truth, I think it's just that, she's so powerless in the situation that if she can lord power over someone as, kind of good-natured as Ken, she'll do it even though he doesn't really deserve any ill will, I think.
Well, I don't know if you noticed, but while you were talking, Mike was clapping for you. He was going like this. And it's like, wow, what a supportive friend.
Wow, I didn't know that because I can't see him right now.
How sad. I see him.
You
Anyway,
can't see me?
I can't see you.
Have you not been able to see me this whole time?
No, I haven't seen Mike this whole time.
his camera's on,
hell?
though. I don't know what to tell you.
Really? That's surprising. Yeah, I thought you had your camera off the whole time. I can see John. I can't see you.
Yeah, he's got his like little light up dartboard looking thing in the back wall. He's like showing us his guns right now. He looks pretty cut. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like, looks like Mike's been kind of lifting some weights and
I like the
toning a little bit.
The picture you're painting. I don't know if you're screwing with me or if this is real, but
these are facts. He kind of right now. He kind of looks like Good Trouble from Instagram with like the facial hair. God damn. Will Ashton, when will you get with the times and start following along with pop culture? We're waiting for you.
No, guys, Jimmy Fallon is going to get a hold of this podcast and turn this into a new version of What's in the Box, where you got to choose if the person is lying or telling the truth about what they're feeling. But it's just, what is John seeing in Mike's camera?
I don't watch Jimmy Fallon, so I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, I was like, that's better than being compared to Snack Boys, I guess. All right, that should be a good place to close this out.
Who is the Snack Boys?
It's from SNL, Lash, and of course you don't know.
I haven't watched SNL in like 5 years.
I'm sure. That's not true. You told me. You liar.
Like a full episode of SNL.
Who watches full episodes anymore besides me?
Me.
I don't know.
I watch every single episode. I love SNL.
You heard it here first, folks. Saturday Night Live, man. All right.
Hit me up.
That'll do it for this week's episode of Mad Men Men. The next episode is episode 12. I actually I forget the name of it, so I have it right here, actually. But yeah, season 5, episode 12 is the next one. That one is commissions and fees. It's the penultimate episode of season 5, and it is a doozy. So we'll try to get to that one as soon as we can. But thank you so much for listening to Mad Men Men, and thank you Mike Overhulse and Will Ashton for coming on the show. I think our listeners are going to be very happy to hear us again on the feed.
I think Eddie Murphy was the last full episode I watched. When was that?
The 90s?
No, like
you mean when he was
guessed it.
hosting?
Yeah.
When he was a cast member?
Also, that's
No.
the 80s, John.
Yeah, it was the 80s, John. Technically, probably the 70s. But
Well, I'm trying to think of like when Will would be
No.
alive. And I'm
It's early 80s.
was he still on the show by the 80s?
Yes, because Lauren is at the helm for like 4 to 6 years, and it started in 76.
Because I know Eddie Murphy, I think, is still the only person who hosted while he was a cast member of the show.
Eddie Murphy joined in 1980 and remained a main cast member until 1984.
Wow, okay.
That tracks.
So before Beverly Hills Cop, but is that before?
I think Beverly Hills Cop was before 84, but then the second one was like maybe 86.
You might be
I'm going to say Beverly Hills Cops is 83.
I think it's 82.
It's 84!
I was going to say 80.
Oh, okay, my bad.
Because like Beverly Hills Cop, anybody like who's on SNL would leave based on how big that movie was. Like, there's no denying. Like, you're a megastar.
I thought you were gonna say anybody could be a Beverly Hills Cop. No. That's the whole point of being a Beverly Hills
I mean, like, that movie is so dependent on his star persona, and it becomes such a big film that he's like untouchable at that point. So like, why would he be on?
Too.
Yeah, it's a good movie. Yeah.
All right. Anyway, we'll see you all later. Thanks for listening. Bye.